everyone can see it, or sending a Q&A to us through that other function. That'll be a question that only we can see as the panelists. So you have those choices. If you're having troubles with the volume or with your video as we go through here, one, this will be recorded. So if you just can't figure it out, then you can get the recording and I'll send that to folks who are registered. But also there's some buttons on Zoom, or if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you should see either at the top right of the corner of your screen, there are some settings. Stories of new hunters and creates learning experience for adults to try hunting, fishing, and foraging for the first time. So Mark lives in Minnetonka, Minnesota, with his wife Patty and their 2 kids who are fledgling hunters and anglers. And I'll also introduce Greg Valle. Greg grew up in the outdoors of southern Minnesota. He's a combat wounded veteran from the Vietnam War era. And after a long career in natural resource protection and management with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, Greg retired. So he now lives in the Brainerd Lakes area, which is in north central Minnesota, with his wife Patty, and can usually found fishing and hunting with friends, family, and new hunters. Greg's an active outdoor mentor with Modern Carnivore. So Mark and Greg, please take it away.
Great, thanks, Jay.
Morning, good to be here.
Really, absolutely, really happy to be here with all of you today. Meg and Jay, thanks so much for having us. As Jay mentioned, we've been talking about doing different things for years, and this is probably an appropriate time to do this for myself, because I just made the category here as you just described it earlier this year. So as a fledgling AARP member, what we're going to do today is talk about, outdoors legacy, and we're going to talk about a few things and share with you some stories of people who have started to hunt and why that's important. I do want to apologize ahead of time. Got a little bit of a tickle in my throat here this morning from, from our drought and seasonal allergies. So I've got my mute button ready along with my tea and water. So if I hit the mute, that's why. So today, again, what we're going to talk about is what is the current state of hunting? What's going on today in hunting? Who actually, is part of the hunting community and actively participating? And how could you possibly be part of it? Now, you watching today, being part of this conversation, maybe you've been a lifelong hunter. Maybe you came to it late in life, and maybe you did hunt with friends, but have stopped recently because maybe your friends who used to hunt aren't active out in the woods anymore. Well, what I'd like to see is I think you have an opportunity to stay engaged and really be part of defining what the future is. And this is really out of focus. I'm going to see if I can adjust this here. There we go. And so what we're going to do today is share some stories about what Greg and I do with Modern Carnivore, how Greg, as an outdoor mentor with Modern Carnivore and all the other work he's done, really is fulfilling sort of his stage of life, and how maybe that might be something that you might be interested in also doing. So I wanted to start by really looking at what I call the generational disconnect. And this is sort of a generalization about the recent history of hunting. But I think most of you could probably relate to this. If you think of youth today and who their great-grandfather was, they may have been, especially in the Midwest here, he may have been a farmer who also hunted as just as part of the lifestyle of a rural culture. And then if you look at that next generation, the grandfather of today's youth, maybe became very active in hunting, but was living in a small town. So still rather rural, had easy access to the outdoors and being able to hunt and fish. We now look at the parents of today's youth, and I've heard this story a lot, and that's why this is a generalization, but I think it's appropriate. A lot of people who tried hunting in their youth, maybe went hunting with their father or another family member, then went away to college and eventually moved to an urban area and really got away from it. So what happened then is we have this divide or this disconnect where a lot of today's youth grew up in a suburb or an urban area with very little connection to hunting and fishing. And so we've got this disconnect, and that creates obviously an issue when it comes to the robustness of our hunting community, but it also creates some opportunities, and I'll share that with you in just a moment. So if we look at hunting participation, so take that storyline in context, and if we look at hunting participation numbers, here's what it looks like. And that is in 1982 in the US, we hit a high point with nearly 17 million hunters. As of 2016, so 5 years ago, that number had declined to 11.5 million. So a pretty dramatic loss there. And if you look at those numbers in terms of U.S. population, in 1959, hunters, were just around 8% of the population. In 2019, that dropped to below 5%. And so if you're passionate about the outdoors and about hunting and conservation, which really is such a core part of hunting, that should be a disconcerting slide to see that happen. And so those are the things that we look at a lot, but there are bright spots. So before we get too depressed with that, there are bright spots that happen all the time. And this last year, in the midst of this challenging environment that the entire world was in, we actually saw an increase in sales of hunting licenses. We saw a 5% increase generalized across the country. Some pockets had more than others. Excuse me. But a 5% increase is just wonderful. Now, that's both a combination of people with lapsed hunting, but it's also a lot of adults who are learning to hunt today for the first time. And that's what we're going to talk about today and what the work we do at Modern Carnivore. So why do people hunt? If you look at it, and again, if you hunted yourself, it probably comes down to things like time spent with family and friends, maybe to relax, spend time outdoors, to stay active. Maybe it's a hobby you've had. Maybe it's something, again, that gets you out and keeps you active. But, excuse me. But one of the things that's, in essence, part of it, but has been very, popular in recent years, has been the desire for people, for that generation, that final generation that's been disconnected, for them to connect with nature and specifically with their food and understanding where it comes from. And so what we see is there are fewer people who are growing up with hunting in their family as part of it, but there are more people who are choosing to start hunting as an adult. And again, a lot of times it's to have that connection with nature, to have that connection with their food, to go out and source it themselves, as we say. So let's talk about a little bit about some myths that are out there and what the reality is of it. So I'll just fire through these. One of the things I hear a lot is, if you don't teach someone to hunt as a child, they'll never take to it. And that has been pretty true in the past. It was either you grew up with it or you didn't. And never the two should meet if you're sort of stuck in that channel. Another thing that gets stated is nobody wants to put in the hard work to learn to hunt. In other words, we've gotten so soft culturally these days that that people don't want to put in the hard work to really become a true hunter. And then the last one is, I, as an older hunter, don't have anything to offer the hunting community. My buddies are all gone, or they just stopped hunting. I stopped hunting for whatever reason, and so I'm sort of done with it. And so these, I couldn't say, are further from the truth. If you look at the first one about teaching, not being able to teach someone if they didn't learn as a child. Adult onset hunters, that's a term that's used a lot, are a fast-growing segment of new hunters. Again, these are people I would characterize as 18 years and older who never grew up with it, but are making the conscious decision to say, I want to learn how to hunt. And again, various reasons as to why they're doing that. As far as putting in the hard work, here's what I have seen firsthand, and it's just been both fascinating and so energizing to see. And that is that these new hunters who are coming into the community today are some of the most committed people I've ever seen, more so than many of the people I hunt with, where they want to understand everything about that animal. They're gonna study all aspects of it. We've done butchering clinics in my garage where these people are in there up to their elbows. They want to understand every cut of meat and how they can utilize every part of that animal. And so I both of those I definitely disagree with in terms of those myths, and seen so many positive things. And then to the last one, not being able to offer anything, that's my challenge to you today, is the need for mentors in the outdoors, whether it's hunting, fishing, foraging, any number of different outdoor activities. There's never been a greater need for mentors, and mentors who are bringing adults in. And I would say that makes it relatively easy, because I think it can be intimidating sometimes if you're looking at a bunch of kids and maybe you're saying, you know what, I can't relate to those kids. Having adults out there who've consciously made the decision to want to learn to hunt and are there to suck up every bit of the experience that they can, it's really fun to work with those people, and would love to have anyone help in the mentoring role for the future of hunting. So you're maybe asking, who are these people? Who is considering hunting for the first time? These adults, these adult onset hunters. I'm going to share with you stories of a few people today, and you're going to hear from Greg and I, and you're also going to hear from them directly in some videos. And the first one I want to talk about is Kalia. Kalia is 30 years old. She lives in Minneapolis. She's a middle school principal. Kalia had no background in hunting and shooting or anything, and as of late, started having an interest in understanding where her food's coming from. And so Kalia registered to attend a spring turkey hunt that Modern Carnivore co-hosted with the SCI Foundation. We did this in north central Minnesota. This is Kalia here with a wing off of a turkey that Greg brought from Nebraska, I believe, to use as a teaching tool at our Learn to Hunt Turkeys event. And so she's a great example. And I guess I just asked Greg to maybe share with you, since he was her mentor, what that experience is like.
Sure, Mark. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you. Thanks.
Good. Yeah. It was really special for me, and I think special for Kalia too. Obviously, she was there to partake in a hunting event, but it turned into so much more than that. And that's kudos to your program, Mark. But Kalia was just very interested in number one, I think, in the whole culture and what that was all about, because that was kind of a mystique to her. But once we got in the woods, it was pretty amazing. And we were looking at just about everything, and we kind of forgot about turkey hunting for a while, which is pretty cool about being in the woods, especially with somebody that's never done it before. And then we got to chase some turkeys around, and it was pretty frustrating. But overall, I think she had a really really good experience, and I obviously had a great experience, and just love to, to help other people participate in the outdoors and see kind of an awakening in those people as to what the whole hunting and fishing and gathering scene is all about. So it was special for me, and I know it was special for Kalia too. Even though she didn't bag a bird, it was certainly special for her, and I really appreciated and got a lot personally out of spending time with Kalia in the woods.
And then how about, so you mentored Kalia on Saturday, and then on Sunday, you took Jim out. Jim's a little bit of a different profile. Jim is actually, so the picture on the right side of the screen is Greg with Jim. And Jim is a lifelong hunter, but he was new to turkey, right?
Yes, yeah, he was. I mean, he has some pretty extensive hunting experience, primarily waterfowl and upland birds, and some big game. But he had never had the experience of being able to be in the woods in the spring hunting turkeys, and he was just totally amped up. And as you can see by the picture here, we managed to get a turkey, and it was pretty special. It kind of almost happened like it's supposed to happen, like you read about in the books and all the stories. But that was actually, I think, our fourth spot. Was the spot we started out in the morning, and we went to a couple other different spots, and we got back here about mid-morning and thinking, well, we'll give this one last chance. And as things would have it, turkey gobbled, and we managed to call it in. And this is kind of the culmination of that hunt. But Jim had never had the opportunity to actually communicate with wild critters in a hunt. And that's one thing that's really neat about the turkey experience is you get to communicate with these birds and kind of be on their same level and try to act like a turkey, which, some of us don't have any problem acting like a turkey normally. So, but yeah, really a good experience, and a good experience for Jim also. And it was pretty appreciative of it. And interesting to see the different levels between, Kalia being a first-time hunter, and then Jim being somewhat of a seasoned hunter, and having that experience with him. I think the real culmination is kind of what's going on with that picture of Kalia there with the knife, and we're actually processing a bird, and that's some of the most interesting things for people who have never hunted before to take part in, is the processing of a wild bird from a game animal, I should say an animal, period, into table fare. And how that whole process works, and actually getting your hands in there and participating in that processing of wild protein.
Yeah, it was a fun weekend, definitely. So another new hunter is Bryce, and Bryce, he's 27, also from Minneapolis. So that's what's interesting is, based here in Minnesota, when we do these events, we get a lot of people who are living right in the heart of the most urban areas. He works, corporate America, had never hunted before. And he attended a pheasant hunt that we did in partnership with Pheasants Forever a couple of years ago. And so why don't we actually hear what Bryce has to say, and a few of the other new hunters from that one.
So why I wanted to come to the hunt camp was because I've always had this desire to hunt, actually. I'm an omnivore, I eat meat, I eat everything basically. But it felt like relying on the industrial farm system to provide food for me seemed wrong for everything. I felt like I needed to harvest and process my own game.
My dad was a cop. I always had guns around, but he didn't like hunting. And then when we moved from Georgia to Minnesota, kind of all the guns went away, and so got busy with life, and now I have time to actually get into hobbies I want to do again.
The reason I came to learn to hunt camp is I haven't done very much hunting previously. I won the opportunity through Facebook.
I wanted to come because I've been interested in hunting for a long time, but it's like when I'm from Boston originally, it's like when you come to Minnesota everyone has their friend groups and their networks, and it's hard to break into it. And hunting's kind of the same way, except a little bit more intimidating because you have firearms involved, which can be dangerous.
I think there's a certain confidence level that one needs to have to do something like this. I mean, it became more important to me to be a little bit more close to my food and the sourcing. I never had the community growing up, and I had this idea like self-reliance is important.
I've always wanted to learn how to hunt. For the past few years, I've been craving an opportunity to connect with other hunters, learn from people who know how to hunt, who've been doing it for many, many years. And I thought this is the best way to do it.
And like we were just in there talking about recipes and morels and stuff like that. It's like it's this. Like my perspective has been completely changed, and for like the first 20 years of my life, like I was absolutely wrong, thinking that it was just people going out there and shooting at creatures. It's like you have to know an animal, know its environment, and kind of care about it.
So if you originally were thinking that myth of you have to learn as a kid was true, hopefully there's some examples to dispel that myth. People from all different walks of life who have this interest and this desire. And the key is, I would encourage you to just figure out, what is a person's reason for having a curiosity about hunting. And I would say curiosity even more so than an interest, because it's going to be different for everyone. As Greg mentioned, the process of turning an animal into food is fascinating to most people, and it really draws them in. So that can be an entry point amongst many, many others. But there are a lot of barriers that you may need to knock down if you're going to help introduce somebody to hunting. And here's one of them. Actually, there's 4 realities I want to share. First one is death is scary. So obviously, that's pretty obvious, but it's not always been, I think hunters haven't always been sensitive to that with people who are not yet hunters. This quote from Becca here, who has been involved with programs of ours for many years, is a good example where she just gets stuck on the thought of pulling the trigger, because she knows that she's going to take the life of that animal, and that'll be a first. And I think for those of us who have hunted our entire lives, we forget how different that is to in the average lifestyle, if you will. So if we look at the hunting process, here's where I think maybe we've made some mistakes in the past. If you look at starting with questions, what is hunting about? Where could I hunt? Go through research and learning, all the way through maybe going out and identifying what you want to hunt, and then ultimately engaging with the quarry, having a kill, hopefully, and field dressing, processing, preparing a meal, socializing around that, and really storytelling. That's all part of the hunting process. But in the past, too often we've focused on that one moment. That really is the pinnacle of the hunting experience, but it's intimidating to a lot of people. And so for that reason, excuse me, we're very careful on starting conversations, oftentimes around food. And so I would just encourage you to be very, very conscious of that, and make sure you understand what the person's interests are and what their level of comfort might be with the idea of killing an animal for the first time. Second reality is that connections and context are important. A lot of things related to new hunters center around food, as we've been discussing. And there's been almost a transition from a traditional trophy shot or which could have been a picture of you with your buck, or a wall mount, to it being focused around the food. These are examples here of new hunters and pictures they've posted of meals that they've prepared for family and friends. And the pride that people take in being able to share the game that they harvested is really powerful and has really become an important part of the hunting experience. This is another event. I'm going to just have you see a few more examples of new hunters that came to a half-day event where they're just exposed to hunting for the first time. And so these are some of the reactions of people when they are first learning about it.
Well, I actually really enjoyed the presentation on the history of hunting, because I think that is the mindset of a lot of people, right? You hunt, the animal goes extinct.
My biggest surprise was, well, I used to think that hunters were maybe, I don't know if I can say this, but a little redneck and maybe just a little gun crazy, which I'm not. And so when throughout the presentations and going out, and it was so interesting that I learned that mostly hunters are very much into conservation, and that it actually helps the herds or the animals that you're hunting to hunt and keep the population down, and that all the money goes into conservation efforts.
I had a great time. I loved the from the lens of a woman hunter, which I've never met a woman that hunts before, and I'm surrounded by men that hunt, and so that was really fun, and to hear about her journey was really interesting. I'm really interested in the food portion of it. I think the knowing where my food's coming from. I didn't realize I actually sort of think I could be interested in maybe taking one of those learn to hunt classes. I mean, it's interesting. It's something, it's always good to expose yourself to something new, and I didn't realize I'd be interested in that part of it.
So you might be asking, how would I start a conversation with somebody about hunting? Anne, at the end of that video, I think is a great example. She was there with her friend, and I think was there for moral support. And I don't think she had any idea that she would sort of understand hunting the way she did. She talked about it quite a bit. She said, I had no idea that hunting had anything to do with conservation. And there you can hear in her voice at the end, she says, I think I actually might be open to doing a learn to hunt class. That's an example of where when you focus on the right things, and she talked about the food, that's what's interested her. And so those are some examples, I think, of the ways that you can start a conversation. And Greg and I talk about this. We were just talking about it earlier today, of the challenge with how to open up a conversation with somebody. And it's going to be different for each person. But there are ways to do it. And if you focus on the other person's curiosity or interest as a starting point, that can often be the best place to start. So with that, I'd like to have Greg share some insights and thoughts around food and how important that is in the hunting conversation. And I will say, I'll give him some recognition here. He and I were just out in Montana for the annual meeting of backcountry hunters and anglers. And Greg and his son Pete won the National Wild Game Cookoff. And so this is a picture of the two of them with their trophy and a picture of their dish that won. Again, this was a national competition. They did a great job. So food's very important to Greg. So I'd just like him to share his thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And we didn't have to put that trophy picture up there, but as long as it's there,
I had to embarrass you a little.
One interesting thing happened. I mean, there was a lot of hunters and fishers at this rendezvous, and in particular, this wild game cook-off was probably one of the highlights of the 3-day event. And after we got done doing this presentation, there was 5 platters there for the judges. There's always a throng of people that's around. And I had several conversations with either spouses or individuals who were in Boise and wanted to attend. And they hadn't really been exposed to a lot of hunting and fishing and a lot of wild game. And they were having an absolute hoot just sampling some of the various dishes that the other chefs were participating in, and really said that was a marvelous experience. They wanted more of it. They wanted more wild game. They wanted to get into it, more and more about it. So it's kind of interesting. You never know where you're going to have an opportunity to kind of share your passion and enjoyment of hunting, fishing, and gathering with people. It can be as simple as a conversation at the store. One of our mutual friends, Eric Jensen, bumped into a guy at the meat counter and had a conversation with him. And turned out that Eric actually took this fella deer hunting, and he shot his first white-tailed deer and was just absolutely thrilled with it. So, I think as folks that have been around hunting and fishing and gathering our whole lives, we have an obligation to pass that passion on and the conservation ethic, the whole thing. And you do that just by having simple conversations. At least I've struggled over the years, okay, how do I find a mentee and blah, 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 and you go through this stuff and you try to come up with all these ideas on how to engage people. But I guess, in my latter years, my more, how shall we say this, enlightened years, come up with the simple solution that all you have to do is have a real small conversation with people, and you never know where it's going to go. And that's really the best way, for those of you listening and watching the webinar today, is just have simple conversations with people. It'll be real obvious whether they have an interest right off the bat or whether they don't. And so it's a real simple thing to do. And that's the best way I've found to get engaged with people, is just have a real simple conversation. It can either be about hunting or it can be about food or whatever. But so that's kind of my experience with it, Mark, from a mentor standpoint, and pretty simple.
And Greg, why don't you quick share with the group? They're probably wondering what that is on the plate.
Yes. Okay. So what we did for the recipes, the small bowl is a bowl of a 3 wild mushroom soup with blue cheese in it. Very, very elegant little presentation with some croutons, maple sugar croutons. Then we have a real pretty simple wild rice pilaf with fiddlehead ferns in the middle. And then, of course, seared mallard breast with a ginger sauce, and then a few wild northern Minnesota blueberries, sugar blueberries, to top it all off. We actually served it with a glass of Minnesota's oldest craft beer, Grain Belt Premium, and that's, people told me that when I got the Grain Belt Premium out, that pushed it right over the top. So anyhow, that's the deal, and it was a real pleasure to do it with my son Pete. So
it was a lot of fun, and it was fun to see people's reactions to it. And so it does, the wild game, the wild food is a great conversation that everyone can relate to. It doesn't matter, even if you don't agree with hunting. I've had conversations about wild game food, and people are interested in it. So consider that. And then, there are barriers, and to be honest, they're rather abundant. And so, if you look at it, there's cultural disconnects today, and it creates a barrier, but also creates opportunity. And these are the things that are helping actually fuel a desire to reconnect through activities like hunting, because there is such noise out there where we are disconnecting from each other, from nature, from a lot of things. And so this is one way that people are finding to reconnect. And well, those barriers are out there. They could be financial, they could be cultural, they could be any number of different things. I would just say acknowledge them, but don't dwell on them. And Greg and I were talking about this earlier today too. Leave politics out of it, because what we're finding is people from all walks of life and all political persuasions are interested in hunting, and I think it's if you bring politics in it, you can instantly start to create some tension, or people might agree with each other, but it's just best to leave it outside of it. And that's where even talking about gun control, things like that. People often ask me, don't you have trouble with the gun issue on introducing people to hunting? And I tell them always, I said, there's literally never an issue. And I believe the reason for that is we have a conversation about food. We talk about the outdoors. We talk about conservation. We talk about how wonderful this food is. We talk about the experience of journeying into new wild lands with no trails. Eventually, we get to a discussion around guns, and the person may say, you know what, I've never shot a gun, and it's really intimidating. But by that point in the conversation, they understand that's part of it, and it never becomes a flashpoint issue. And this is with people who've never shot a gun before in their life. And so I would encourage you just to leave all of that out. Greg, I don't know if you have any thoughts or any examples of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. When we did the turkey hunt, I think one of the most interesting things to me is we had one session beforehand on basically sighting in your shotgun, and there was people that hadn't shot much there, or very, very little, or none. And it was really enlightening to me to watch those people kind of come around with the whole thing. We shot targets with turkey heads on them, and these people had an absolute hoop doing it, and they felt like they'd really accomplished something when their gun was doing what it was supposed to do. And it was very, I think, and the people I think that participated in it that hadn't hunted before go, well, this isn't all that tough. Now I know kind of what to watch out for, what to look for. I'm actually learning something here that's, not only valuable in a hunting situation, but in other situations too. So a lot of learning opportunities out there, just a ton of learning opportunities for anybody, any age. So that's what I kind of took away from it, Mark. And just fun with firearms in general, safe fun with firearms, and they really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's, recognize them, but don't dwell on any of those barriers, and don't go to many of the extremes that I think media and other places go to these days. Just stay focused on what they want to learn. The last reality is that, again, we've talked about when people say, how do I start this? What do I do? I'd state very simply, it begins with a conversation. A conversation with somebody. Again, it could be about food. It could be about guns if they're interested. It could be about getting outside. Any number of different things. And just ask somebody, if you're having a meal, hey, have you ever hunted? Maybe they say, no, I have no interest, never doing it. Well, there you go. You leave it there. Or maybe they say, you know what, I never grew up with it. And then that's the opportunity right there where you can say, oh, that's too bad. Have you ever thought about it? And then you can take the conversation from there. So, excuse me. So, mentoring, again, is an important part of the future of hunting. I think I'm going to make it through here. And that's something where, some of you today may not be hunters or just curious what this topic is about. It's never too late to learn to hunt, I'll tell you that. And it's also never too late to become a mentor. And if you do have background and experience in hunting, I would encourage you to consider introducing somebody to the outdoors. One last video here, and this one is with a couple mentors at one of the events that we did, excuse me, 2 years ago. And then at the very end, it's some of the hunters who were at that event in terms of being asked as to whether they'll continue to hunt.
Yes, it was the first time mentoring for me. I couldn't be more excited about it. It was for me. It was really different when coming up with that first flush, you know it's coming. And my mentees tell these nervous teetering, sort of ushering him to the right position. It's bird flushes, and the dog handler yells rooster, and he swings and he fires and he misses, which happens to everybody. And like, it's just, you can see that light in his eyes, that buzz. It's like, he's never going to forget that feeling. The campfire stories were awesome. The camaraderie was great. But for me, the most enjoyable thing was seeing guys that had never hunted before their entire lives. My mentee had never taken a wild animal, had never gone out hunting. He'd had some experience with guns and firearms, so that was great. Speaking to your point, that he was very confident and safe with a gun, but had never gone out, never hunted anything. So when we got out into the field and we're both working behind this dog, there was just this sense of anticipation. Like, we know the birds are out here. We know that this could all come together. All of the elements of this are right. And so then when it did, and he harvested his first animal ever, the excitement, I mean, we were cheering, yes, screaming out loud, and he was so joyous, his heart's pumping. I mean, he's just into this. To take it from first experience ever, then to plucking the bird, preparing the bird, eating the bird, that complete picture. And there was so much conversation about, getting back to your roots in terms of food sources. How do we go through our lives being aware and conscious of the things that we're eating, and that bigger picture of like being connected to our food sources. And that was the most enjoyable part of this weekend for me, was seeing these guys go from where they wanted to be, getting themselves put into a program that helps them get there and gives them the skills necessary then to take it into the world and go do it themselves, and seeing that joyous experience of having been successful at it.
Absolutely. I've been talking to a few guys here, and we've already made plans to go out in the next couple of weeks to try pheasant hunting without dogs. So it's more of a hike in the woods with a gun, and don't expect to get anything. But yeah, definitely.
Do I think I'll continue hunting? I hope so. I've invested a lot of money into it already. But yeah, I'm going deer hunting in November. The rifle season opens.
Brian, my mentor, gave me his information to contact him to go hunting after this. I plan on calling a couple of friends who don't even hunt and trying to get them to come with me. So, yes, most definitely.
It's in my blood. It's in my blood.
Oh, I was on mute. Sorry. Those are some examples of new hunters who are absolutely committed. So Bryce, the first guy in the black jacket, that program was 2 years ago. I just saw him last week at an event for the first time in 2 years. And he is completely into a hunting lifestyle now. He's been bow hunting. He's grouse hunting. He's pheasant hunting. He wants to duck hunt this fall. So, there are so many people out there that are looking for the opportunities, but they need guidance. They need help. Not a lot, oftentimes, just a little bit of help to guide them along. And so, I would just say, in terms of looking at those four realities, in terms of death being a scary thing, I would encourage you, if you're mentoring, just focus on the whole hunting experience. Again, there's so much to it. Find out what that person is interested in. And that gets to the connections and the context. Seek to understand what their motivations are. it might be something that really surprises you and you never thought of. Recognize or acknowledge there are barriers, but don't dwell on them. And as we talked about, don't bring politics into it. Just stay focused on the hunt. And it all begins with a simple conversation. So I would just encourage you to initiate it yourself. Just reach out to somebody and in any social setting if the opportunity is right. And you might be surprised. They might express interest or curiosity. That's the thing I'm always looking for, is just curiosity, not necessarily interest. So, with that, I just want to say, again, what can you do? Look for those conversation starters. Connect people to learning programs. We have a couple websites at Modern Carnivore that are listed here: huntingcamp.live and modcarn.com. They both have resources to help new hunters. And if you have interest in becoming an outdoor mentor like Greg and many of the other mentors in our group, feel free to just reach out to us at info@modcarn.com, and we'd love to look for opportunities to connect you in with new hunters. So with that,
hey Mark,
Greg.
One last thing here. I was just thinking about this, and Jay, what would be kind of interesting is for AARP to really get both feet in this thing and kind of start a silver boot program, the silver sneaker thing you got going on. Let's do a silver boot thing, and start working that. The other thing is, when we think about mentoring, we're always thinking about mentoring somebody younger, and I think that's a fallacy. The two women in the one video, middle-aged women who wanted to learn to hunt, and I think there's lots of opportunities there for even older adults to learn how to do this, and definitely encourage anybody that's an AARP member to contact Mark and get involved in this stuff. It's pretty cool stuff, and it isn't a bust your ass type of deal. It can be a very enjoyable experience out there, and just have fun with it. I sure encourage everybody to get involved.
That's fantastic. I love that silver boots concept, Greg. And if I have it my way, we'll be doing something out in the field before, by the time we can get back together in person. So I want to thank you both. We're going to take some questions here in just a moment, but just to kind of put a cap on what you presented with us, it was fantastic. A lot of practical information and tips on how folks can be effective at mentorship and dispel some of those myths that are in my head, if they're in your head, about those kind of barriers that we have to reaching out with others, discussing hunting and having a conversation, on to how do we really influence people. And we saw from your videos and the participants themselves that quite powerful experiences for the mentors and the learners. So that's fantastic. At AARP, we're always working on, at the beginning of the program, I described how we try to listen to our members and help them connect with opportunities and resources that help them with what's relevant and interesting to them and what issues they're concerned about. And it's hard to build intergenerational programs. It's hard to connect older people and younger people for a lot of different reasons, but you're doing it with your programs here, and it's fantastic. So my hope is that more of our members and we will be working together on this for the years to come. So a few of the questions came through. I was so fascinated, and others were about that sort of life cycle of a hunting experience, that it's not just about going out in the field and harvesting an animal or catching a fish or finding a mushroom, but it starts with planning and discovery on to entering the field and exploring. And then it doesn't end at that point. Of course, now we're processing food and sharing our stories around the campfire afterward. So perhaps each of you could give some more examples of how you describe that for new hunters that are trying to learn. It's not all about that harvesting experience, the shot of the gun or the bow or whatever, but instead for others, there's much more to it, and that's how we can connect with individuals and help them really develop that love and curiosity for these sports.
Yeah, it's I get surprised each year, hunting season, when we're bringing different people out, the new things I learn about what people are interested in. And one of the big ones several years ago, we produced a film called Awaken the Hunter Within, which was, we chronicled the journey of 3 new hunters on film. And Pierce, who was one of those 3 who didn't harvest an animal, but came out of the back end, I was having a conversation with him, and I said, what did you enjoy most about the experience? And he said, hands down, butchering the deer. So we had a deer from another fellow hunter, and he was part of that. And again, it was just a fascination with, how do you turn this animal into meat? And I remember at that time, now it seems so commonplace to me, but I remember at the time thinking, being surprised by that. I wouldn't have thought that the process of butchering would have been that engaging for a new hunter, but it was. And I've seen that a lot since too, where we do these butchering clinics, and we have people come who have no interest in hunting even. They just want to see the process. They want to understand it and be part of that. And again, I think it's an example of that disconnect we have with the natural world and our food. People are craving that connection and finding it in whatever way they can. Greg?
Yeah, I'd echo that 100%. Actually, one of my favorite parts of the whole experience is not only field dressing and taking care of the meat in the field, and that's an interesting concept to consider, is that once that animal is dead and killed in an ethical fashion, it's now raw meat, and your focus has to change. Your focus has to change to, okay, now I've got to take care of this as food, and just that whole process of taking care of food, and we have processing parties. When we do our game, we get 3, 4, 5 of us together and make a party out of it. And maybe we'll even cook a little bit of it up, in a pan on a camp stove or something, right when we're doing it, or on the stove upstairs. It's just really a bonding experience. And just an aside from the when we were out at that backcountry hunters and anglers rendezvous, to give you an idea of how magnetic and entrancing a dead wild animal can be. One of the features of that was the processing of a 3-year-old male buffalo. They brought it in. There was probably 200 people around the buffalo. The Blackfeet tribe blessed all the tools and started the butchering process. And they said, hey, anybody that wants to get in here and start helping us process this buffalo, grab a knife, we'll bless it, get in here and do it. And it was amazing the number of people that actually wanted to help process that buffalo. Just really, really interesting to see that connection where people were diving in and doing it, or at least watching it from 2, 3, 4, 5 foot away. Just figuring things out and just experiencing that. It was quite interesting. So anyhow, that's my thoughts on the food connection. I love it. I love to eat it all.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. And it's different so much than my personal experience. A lot of my hunting is very solitary or just with my dad, and it's just the 2 of us. And I'll tell you, I have a mentor in my dad who does everything it takes to butcher our animals just right. And next I'll need to find someone to mentor myself who likes to do that part, because it's not my favorite part. So that's what I'll be looking for. All right, well, we're getting close here, but I want to ask this last question that we have, and that is, if a new mentor wants to get involved with Modern Carnivore, I assume, obviously they can go to your website, they can send you an email, but they want to mentor other people in what we've been discussing here today. How do they get started? And then do you offer training, or are they kind of out there on their own, or how does this work?
Yeah, good question, Jay. So Yeah, absolutely. Can email us, can go out and check out on the 2 websites listed there, different content. We do recipes, we do films, we have 2 podcasts. Hunting Camp Live is an online training platform where we do video-based learning. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that is on the docket of doing mentor training. We have not done it yet, but that is something that we may roll out this fall. And so if people have interest in that, by all means, shoot me a note. And if you would like to just jump right in to Hunting Camp Live and be an outdoor mentor like Greg in there, and it could be as simple as answering questions on the Facebook group to jumping in on the deep end and being a mentor out in the field with these new turkey hunters like Greg was with Kalia and Jim. And so all different levels of commitment and opportunity are there. There are a lot of other, there are a lot of other programs out there, different things you could join, tap into, maybe at the local level. Obviously, I think that this one is the best. But I would just say, again, start those conversations with people, and if you want opportunities, shoot us a note.
Very good. Then we'll wrap it up with each of you. Greg, you first, then Mark. Any just final thoughts for our audience out there today?
Thanks, Jay, and it was a real pleasure being here and participating in this. And I would just say, like they say in hockey, keep your stick on the ice, and if it isn't on the ice, you're not going to score any goals. So get your stick on the ice, get involved, and you'll never regret it.
Well, my mom would have the same advice. That's what she'd always tell me when I was a hockey player. Keep your stick on the ice. How about you, Mark?
I would just say find people who are curious. Again, doesn't have to be interested. Find people who are curious about hunting and have a conversation with them. See where it goes. And I think you can see here with Greg today, I think if you mentored somebody into the hunting community, you would get as much, if not more, out of it as they would. And I think you'd be amazed at how enriching it can be for your life. And, to the theme today here, really leaving a legacy. I think there's some great opportunities out there. So I just hope people do that.
Very good. Well, I can't thank both of you enough. I've learned a ton from you today as mentors for myself. We're going to conclude the webinar. Thanks again to you. Thanks again to the audience out there. And I guess happy hunting.
Thanks so much, Jay.
Thanks.